Should we be able to burn the American flag, our national symbol? This flag was presented to my grandmother at the occasion of my grandpa's death. Whenever he died, at his funeral, they presented this to him. My grandfather served in World War II. He was in the Corps of Engineers in the United States Army. He served on the Burma Road. And my grandfather and I were sitting together when I was in my 20s, and there was an episode or a protest that was being televised on television, shown on television, that involved protesters burning the American flag. And my grandfather was highly offended. He said, we went overseas and we fought, and many of us died. Many of us came back with many of us lost limbs and came back with traumas because of having to fight to preserve the freedoms that are represented by this symbol. And to burn it was highly offensive to him. So the argument, and you see, back then I remember having a friendly discussion with him. Well, you know, Grandpa, it's free speech, you know, for somebody to burn a flag. I know we don't like it, we hate that, but it's free speech. You know, but the more I think about it, does it really curtail anyone's speech to not be able to desecrate and burn our national symbol? If I'm not allowed to burn the American flag, am I thereby not able to express my dissent? Am I thereby not able to express my displeasure with my government or with the direction that my country's going? If I'm not allowed to burn the American flag, does that somehow take away my rights to express my opinion and say what I think? I don't think so. I know the Supreme Court's disagreed with that, but I think there's some things that ought to be sacred. There's some things that we ought to agree upon. Now, speaking of agreeing upon, depending on the survey that you look at, somewhere between 60 to 80% of Americans think it should be illegal to burn the flag. So if 80% at the highest and 60% at the lowest of us think that, hey, this ought to be sacred and this ought to be honored and it ought not to be desecrated, it ought not to be burned, that there's a boundary and a limit, then I think that should be the law. And I'm all for free speech. I worked as a freelance reporter. I've worked many years as a newspaper editor in addition to being a pastor. And so I'm all about free speech, and speech that I don't like, speech that I don't agree with. It's okay. If I'm going to be able to say what I want, I've got to be able to listen to what you say, even if I disagree. But there's got to be some boundaries. And really, sadly, we shouldn't need a law. We shouldn't need a law to tell us not to burn our national symbol. For all of its flaws, I'm so grateful to be an American and be living in the United States.